and welcome to a League of Women Voters of Greater Hartford candidate debate. I am Carole Mulready, Chair of the Voter Service of the League of Women Voters in the Greater Hartford area, and I will serve as moderator of this debate for the 5th Senatorial District in Connecticut. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages informed and active participation by citizens in government. We are pleased to bring you this debate in cooperation with West Hartford Community Television. The debate will be conducted in a modified cumulative time format, which is designed to enable candidates to freely elaborate on their approaches to a variety of issues, unimpeded by the strict time constraints of more traditional debate formats. Each candidate will have a total of approximately 10 minutes of response time during the debate, and each will have a 2-minute closing statement. During the speaking, each candidate is timed by a timekeeper, and periodically those timekeepers from the League will hold up signs indicating the amount of time the candidate has left. Candidates are encouraged to rebut and surrebut, responding to their differences as they perceive them, understanding that the clock is running. Each round of questions is initiated by the moderator. It is my pleasure now to introduce the candidates who have committed their time and energies to this important aspect of our democratic process, running for elective office. So with me tonight is Beth Bye to my left and Philip Chabot on my right. And by lottery, we chose who would speak first, and I will introduce you first to Beth Bye. She is state senator from the 5th Senatorial District, and she is in her 4th term. She focuses her legislative efforts on education, economic development, disability rights, protecting the environment, and public health. Beth has spent her work career running and developing early childhood programs in West Hartford, Hartford, and Bloomfield. She first got into public service and advocacy, working for high-quality preschool for all and fair wages for child care workers. She is currently the executive director of Our Farm, an educational farm in Bloomfield. She and her wife Tracy live in West Hartford and thoroughly enjoy living, working, and recreating in the Hartford region. And now Philip Chabot is a lifetime Connecticut resident, a successful regional businessman, and a respected community leader. Philip is a graduate of Litchfield High School and UConn School of Engineering with a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering. Philip and his family own and actively manage the Farmington Gardens banquet facility and North House restaurant in Avon. Philip is a resident of Farmington and is an active community leader in the following positions: President of the Farmington Chamber of Commerce, President of the Rotary Club of Farmington, President of the Exchange Club of Farmington, and a member of the Farmington Republican Town Committee. He is also a Justice of the Peace. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. So I know that you have probably heard and have been asked a lot of questions already on the budget, so we will certainly be addressing budget and taxes here tonight. The first question goes to you, Phil, and it goes as follows. Our state budget includes a large percentage of mandatory payments for debt service and ongoing pensions, leaving fewer and fewer options to balance the budget. Which reductions in spending or revenue increases would you support or oppose? Please be specific.
I'm not in favor of any revenue increases. I think we have more of a spending problem than an income problem. I think I think we can run Connecticut more efficiently. I think a lot of our government agencies run inefficiently, and I just see, as a business owner, where we can have efficiencies. One would be the state university system. I think we can consolidate that and have less administration.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that question, Carol. I think that we do have some long-term obligations, and I know folks are not always so high on Governor Malloy, but he's the first governor in decades who's fully funded our long-term obligations and made progress towards these long-term obligations. We also last year did something that we're seeing benefits to right away, which is we put a volatility cap on the budget, which is Connecticut, because of the investment culture in Fairfield County, has unexpected revenue sometimes out of earnings reports and capital gains. And now we cannot take those and use those for general operating. Those have to, when the returns come in higher, those have to go into the rainy day fund now. And we've been able to put $1 billion in the rainy day fund. And then when that's done, those can be directed to pay off long-term obligations. This sounds like a wonky policy thing, but it's a really big thing. Because in the past, legislators would have these years when the dollars would come in and they would be spent. Now they can't be. They have to go into this fund, and the only thing they can be used for is to pay off those long-term obligations. So I think the past 8 years we've been disciplined on paying off for the first time, and now we've taken a proactive step that when we get those revenues, they'll be directed there.
Okay. Bill, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think one of that big the volatility cap was a Republican-led initiative, from what I understand, and we had a Republican budget that I think would have had better cost savings that we did have some bipartisan support on, but unfortunately was vetoed by Governor Malloy.
Yeah, well, I would just say very quickly back that the volatility cap was the brainchild of Senator Fonfara. Republicans supported it and Democrats supported it. It was an important initiative, and it wasn't about party, but I will just say Senator Fonfara's been after it for several years.
Yeah, I think it is very important.
Yeah.
Okay. Staying with money issues, how does a $15 minimum wage fit into your thinking and planning for legislation this year or in the years to come? You get this first, Beth.
Well, I think a $15 minimum wage is a really important step for Connecticut. I think sometimes people think of teens getting their first job. The vast majority of people making minimum wage in Connecticut are over 30 years old. Connecticut has a very expensive, the cost of living is very high, and you just cannot even begin to make it on the minimum wage right now. I think it needs to be tiered so that businesses have time to know it's coming and predict it. But I do think it's an important goal for Connecticut and that we should be working towards it. Other cities and states have done it. So.
Okay. Bill?
I think already, unfortunately, I think our minimum wage having a minimum of $15 an hour would hurt small businesses, especially food service, for example, would be one where I'm very familiar with. The minimum wage is to get people into the workforce, not to keep people in the workforce. Any good employer who keeps their employees would like to don't want their employees at minimum wage. We bring employees in at minimum wage, but if they're doing a good job, they get raises. And if we make a $15 minimum wage, I don't think the state can be affordable in some things, and we have other costs that go up. We will have food cost increase because the restaurants have to increase cost. So I think it's just a snowball effect, and I don't think the minimum wage sticks for a lot. I don't think people should be stuck in a minimum wage job for a while. I think an energized person gets out of the minimum wage, should be able to get out of the minimum wage quickly.
Okay. Anything else?
I would just say it hasn't kept up with inflation, that if the minimum wage, in the 70s was a minimum wage now, it would be $15. That most of the, when you look at the wealth that's been created the past 10 years, most of it has been in the top 1%, whereas workers are more productive than ever, they're working harder than ever, more hours than ever, and they're not getting their share of what they're producing and of the profits that they're participating in.
Go ahead.
I would agree that there should be some type of tiered minimum wage. When minimum wage was probably introduced, they should probably tie it to something like the consumer price index or something, but it hasn't been done. So to jump from all the way up to $15 an hour, I think is, even if it's tiered over a long period, maybe we should start at what we are now and go on the consumer price index. But I think it's too drastic of a jump, even if you do it in like a 4-year kick-in, because you only have your CPI raises 3 to 4% a year typically. But we'll see what happens with inflation.
So I heard you say with like cost of living
Mm-hmm.
increases. And I recently read something about some people suggesting that as a possibility. If we get an increase in the minimum wage, does it make sense to then have it go automatically up year by year? How do each of you feel about that in these tough budget times, or does it make the budgeting any easier?
I don't know if it makes the budget any easier. Of course, you can always look at, and I've heard people say, hey, if you have the minimum wage increase, you also have payroll taxes increase and things like that. I'm for tying the current minimum wage to consumer price index, but I wouldn't be for raising the minimum wage arbitrarily and then a consumer price index. I think business can adjust for that more, and I think if you have a stronger business economy, then there's more purchasing power out there, which raises your, I think, increase the minimum wage. It doesn't increase the minimum wage, but I think it increases wages as there's more dollars in the economy.
Yeah, and the data really shows that when minimum wage goes up, all those dollars are spent and put in the local economy, because people making minimum wage are spending all their money. And I do think it should be indexed.
That's the right word. Yes, thank you. Okay, that's the one I couldn't remember. Okay, let's try a little on transportation, which has been a very big topic in Connecticut over many years now. Some claim that the gasoline tax that was put in place to try to keep our infrastructures and roads going in good shape have become regressive, and we're charging more to those who have less to pay. It also is becoming somewhat obsolete because of the rise of electric and hybrid vehicles and efficiency with the cars. What do you suggest to fund our local, regional, and statewide transportation issues? And you might include tolls if you'd like in your consideration, Phil.
I am, on first basis, I am against tolls. I think it's just another tax that the population of Connecticut doesn't need. We also need, whatever type of funding we do have or taxes, we need to have a lockbox so it is only spent on transportation projects. I've seen a lot of infrastructure getting fixed, but we need a lot more to be done. I read a report somewhere where we are on the bottom, I think the bottom 10 in number of bridges that need to be repaired. Mm-hmm. Over 100 bridges are deficient, and that's a major problem. And one bridge collapsing or one bridge problem affects the local economy. It would just be the town economy. If you have one bridge in Farmington go and be under repair, that creates traffic. It creates problems for everybody. I don't think I've seen reports that gasoline tax receivables are down because we are using just about as much gas because people are driving more. We get more efficiencies, but I think there's more usage as well. And then it's basically back to the businesses.
Okay.
Well, I think transportation, if you look at any, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce or a progressive group, I think everyone in Connecticut agrees we need to improve our transportation system. It's important for economic development, it's important for quality of life, and our greatest strength is our proximity really to Boston and New York. We have great schools, great quality of life, and so we have to find a way to invest in transportation. I think the new add-on from New Haven to Hartford has been tremendously received. I think the busway, for all the hubbub, has proven to be a really effective transportation tool for low-income workers trying to get to manufacturing jobs along that busway. So it's important for many reasons. Phil mentioned we had I think we're the third worst in the U.S. with bridges in need of repair. That takes money, and a lot of money. It's very expensive to build bridges. And in fact, in Connecticut, when I was chair of appropriations, we discovered that it would be way cheaper to bring on 100 engineers to the Department of Transportation than to keep outsourcing everything. But it's very difficult to do in this climate of negativity about state employees and the expenses of state employees, even if the numbers make rational sense. So I don't think we're always making the most rational decisions as we approach transportation infrastructure. I am all for tolls. I have been financing New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts infrastructure and their highways for decades. We are the only state along the Eastern Corridor that does not have tolls. And there are ways where we could let Connecticut residents get tax credits, but collect it from the trucks and the cars. And we are a state where people are driving from New York to Boston and from Florida to Maine. They're coming through here, they're using our roads, and they should be paying for it.
You mentioned the busway. I think, yeah, we do need good transportation dollars spent in good projects, and I think the bus was a project that wasn't that great. I hear we have roughly a weekly rider costs the state $9,600 per weekly rider is what it costs. We have $22 million worth of spending for that annual operating income, and we can't shut it down because now if we do shut it down, we'd have to pay the federal government back the funding we received. So that works out to about $180 a week. I think we could do better projects and something like that. I know we need to start somewhere, but I think there's some better options.
Well, I would take issue to those numbers. I don't have the exact numbers in my head. I know what I have heard. And everyone who has a car hates the busway. Let me tell you that a single mother with 2 kids trying to get to work on Park Road at one of the manufacturers down there is thrilled to be able to get to work in 15 minutes instead of an hour and a half. It makes a huge difference in the quality of life, and we need workers for our manufacturers. I think I figured one time there are 1,500 manufacturing jobs along that corridor, and now you have a way for people to get to them. And a car, if you make minimum wage, you literally cannot have a car. If you make $15 an hour, it's very difficult to have a car. I've never heard anyone who didn't have a car complain about the busway, let me just say. And I think our job as a community is to build culture and give people options and ways to get to work when they need it.
Cool. All set. Okay. Let's turn to education for a minute. When a child leaves the traditional public school to attend a magnet school, their dollars go with them. However, towns are often forced to pay more to that magnet school than it would pay if a student had stayed in the town school system. How would you support the town's ability, the various towns' ability to cover the costs?
I personally think the magnet school program, there are many great portions. I don't like that the tax dollars stay with the child. I think it's up to the public school system to keep the dollars in the school system, because that's how you can budget. All these towns are working with fixed budgets as well, and we kind of keep throwing the problem back on the towns. Like, hey, the tax dollars are going to follow the student. They budgeted for so many students, and now they're leaving the district, they're leaving the tax dollars are going with the student. So I don't really agree with that whole system.
Okay, Beth, you want to take that?
Well, I would sort of question the premise. I know a lot about magnet funding, and I know that when towns send a student to a magnet school, they are not educating that child anymore. So, and they are receiving the education cost sharing dollars. So, it's, in my mind, it's more of a swap, and the families have choices. And we have schools in Connecticut that are separate and unequal, and the Connecticut Supreme Court determined that, and the answer to the legislature, and really accepted by the communities, is that we would have magnet schools and that those magnet schools would be funded. I have a lot of challenges with the magnet school funding in other ways. I think that because of the way magnets and charters are funded, some districts are keeping their ECS plus. I mean, that their students can go wherever, and they keep their education cost-sharing funding, and it ends up being that the state is sending particular communities sometimes $20,000 per student that they are educating. So I think the system needs reform, and it needs to be a part of the education cost-sharing reform. But as a state, we have to be holistic in our approach, and we have to say, we made a commitment. The other option was busing, which the region rejected wholeheartedly, and I would guess would reject today. And magnet schools are a way to give families choices and desegregate school system.
Okay. Phil, anything
No,
on that one?
else to add.
Okay, because we could go on with this with the ECS formula, but if you don't mind,
That
I'm
could
not
take the
going
whole
to.
debate.
I
Yeah,
am not
we
going to
only
go
have 10
down with that
minutes.
formula. Okay, so let's take one of the topics that is a very important one for the League of Women Voters, and with the challenges of the budget, this is why we ask this question, because it becomes one of what are your priorities as I ask this question. All those challenges, managing budgets and deficits, how would you treat the programs of DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection? Is that a budget priority for you? What kind of priority is it for you?
For me, it's a really big priority, and if there are two places we've made huge errors in the budget over the past decade, it's cuts to Department of Environmental Protection and cuts to higher education, such as UConn and our state university system. We need to protect our environment, and we need to protect our workforce, and those are, I think we've protected local education funding in a way that other states did not. In New York, they cut cities and towns 6% when they hit the downturn. Connecticut maintained that funding, which was important to keep property taxes down. But we really went at higher education, and we really went after DEEP. And I think it has a terrible impact on two of Connecticut's biggest advantages. Quality of life, which is our environment, is a big part of that, and our workforce. Making it too expensive for many of our residents to afford college. And now we have 13,000 jobs that are unfilled with small manufacturers and large manufacturers in Connecticut. And we don't have the bandwidth to fill that given the cuts we've made to higher education.
Phil, how about a little bit of discussion about what you think about the environment and protecting our environment in the overview of difficult budgets and taxing times?
When I've given definitely a lot of looks over the budget, and there's so many there's so many places that you want to keep money in, and I think the environment is a very important one. I'm not familiar enough with the environment. I'm not familiar enough with their budget to know if I could really cut anything or not. I think there's probably room for some inefficiency. I mean, for some more efficiencies, probably from a more administrative standpoint, but DEEP also covers all our state parks and all the, I want to live in Connecticut. I want the snow, I want the sun, I want the beach, I want the hills. So I want all that. So that is important. I thought it was a shame that we closed campgrounds and stuff during busy holiday seasons, because those are the people who are using the campgrounds are the people who are typically more underprivileged. Mm-hmm. And so when you take away their vacation, they may have been saving that for their whole summer to go on this campground. So when we had budget cuts and things like that and we shut those down, I think that was really the wrong choice.
Okay. Good points from both of you. You have, as a legislator, whether you're there or about to be there, a balancing act constantly about what's the budget and taxes and the services. So I'm going to ask you if you have thought about any suggestion you would propose in the upcoming legislative session to make Connecticut more business friendly on the one hand, but continue to improve or at least maintain social services that compensate for many not having a living wage or having to rely on Social Security. So the first part, suggestions for making business more friendly.
I think we have a great business base in Connecticut, but I feel like as a small business owner myself, there's a lot of hurdles we have to jump. I think there's some. I'm losing the word. There's just some regulations that I think are burdensome. There's extra paperwork that's burdensome. I know going for a liquor license, that can be burdensome. I understand when I opened a new restaurant, the first place we had, it was a brand new liquor license. So I understand all the regulation and process we had to go through. When I opened the second restaurant, there was a liquor license there. The day I bought it, it took me 9 months to get the liquor license. And it's just inefficiencies. And I think the Department of Consumer Protection needs, which does all the licensing, needs to kind of be relooked at. And I think it could be a lot more online registrations, and I just see a lot of inefficiencies. And we need to be able to plan as business owners. We try and budget 4 or 5 years out easily, and when we don't know what's coming down the pike, we have no idea how to really plan and assume how to really spend our money. So a lot of times we're shooting in the dark, I think.
You know, I agree with some of what you said, Phil, in terms of regulations and making it easier. And actually, DEEP has worked on doing that. I do think consumer protection needs to get much better. Representing West Hartford and Farmington, where restaurants are a big part of the economy, that has to be improved so they can get up and running. And I think some of that's on the local level too, in terms of building permits, et cetera. The other thing in terms of supporting businesses, I think we have to actually go out and do it. You know, when you're, like I'm a senator, I know we have this really cool data center project coming in New Britain where they're putting a fuel cell. I was involved in trying to help them. I know that R&D Dynamics in Bloomfield is working on a new energy efficient system that will work with fuel cells. And last week, I brought them together along with Doosan from South Windsor that makes fuel cells to say, look, you guys, you're all in Connecticut. You're using a Connecticut fuel cell. Look at this company in Bloomfield has this new invention that we were able to get a bill last year and call it Class 1 renewable, which is wonky, but it allows them to sell them all over the country and have the companies that buy them get the payback. So now the data center in New Britain can use this new product, and that will help them generate electricity. And I think we need to go out and talk to our businesses and know when there's something innovative coming along and bring them together and help. Like Ned Lamont did with Infosys, just said, okay, we all need to be on board with helping Connecticut and bringing these minds together. Okay.
One of the things that I wanted to add is I don't think we as legislators, or soon-to-be legislators, hopefully, that we should be kind of giving big grants or picking winners and losers sometimes. I find I've heard a lot of complaints about that on the campaign trail. I think we should have a flat system that if we want to start new businesses or something like that, we have a 5-year payback of business property taxes or other business taxes to incentivize people to stay. Maybe you have a 5-year tax-free period, but you have to stay for 10 years or something like that. So I think there's ways to improve the business climate here.
This has been a very good discussion, I think, and we've used up probably all of the time we should have used, but I'm going to say that we still need to have the closing statements, and I'm sure we can figure out a way to make that happen. Okay. So I believe you go first. Beth?
Okay. Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters and Carole and the Timers and Phil for coming and for running. You see, it's not so easy, but it's really important work. So 2018 is a critical election for so many reasons in our state, in our nation. There we have so much at stake in terms of our values. I'm running because I believe government can be a force of good in people's lives. I legislate from the value that we look out for each other and that we are working toward the common good. I've worked with 5th District communities to rebuild their public libraries and firehouses with state assistance, and we've added to the region's rails to trail system. Many small businesses, mostly manufacturers in the 5th District, have benefited from state loans and grants, adding critical jobs at difficult times in our economy. Over the last 8 years, Connecticut has taken big steps forward to provide affordable housing. Bloomfield and West Hartford particularly have benefited from grants. Medical call rates have been improved because I worked on a bill to give localities more control over their response to medical calls. And Connecticut's job training and housing options for people living with disabilities have improved, but not nearly enough. I still have a lot of work to do to help those communities. My number one priority, though, has always been enhancing Connecticut's world-class education system. The public system requires funding and oversight, and during difficult times in the economic downturn, we still protected those dollars for our schools. Efforts to maintain higher education funding fell short, and cuts have hurt colleges. I'll keep these efforts forward to keep going forward because our companies need the workers and we need an educated citizenry. I'll keep protecting our environment. I was one of only 2 senators to receive a 100% rating from the League of Conservation Voters last year. In my years at the Capitol, I fought for these issues and more that help build community. I'm a leader you can count on, and I ask for your support November 6th.
Thank you, Beth. Phil.
Connecticut needs leaders who are willing to make tough decisions and look at the problems from a different perspective and with a fresh set of eyes. I am one of those leaders. As an owner of a small business, I know the importance of keeping our costs low and budgets balanced. Connecticut has a spending problem, not an income problem. One-party rule has hurt the state, and it's a time for a change. I am running for the citizens of 5th District as an option of someone who's not a career politician and does not intend to become one. I want to go to Hartford, clean up the inefficiencies and wasteful spending, and then get back to business so everyone in Connecticut can prosper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. We hope for all of you who have listened that this debate has assisted you as you get prepared to go to the voting booths on November 6th. And we certainly hope you will share this information with your friends and neighbors. Tell them that this program will be available during the month of October on the television stations that are covered in West Hartford, and also online at streaming through the YouTube sources for whctv.org. So please take advantage of seeing these candidates again and sharing the information with them.